take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
The Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation. Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. It is Tuesday, January 27th, 2015, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. Thank you for making us a part of your day, and a shout out to all our listeners in the snowed-in Northeast. Oh my God, I saw Boston had over 1.5 feet of snow, and I'm sure farther north, they probably had even more snow. So our listeners in Vermont and Maine, I hope you're able to dig out. Hope you still got power and are able to listen to us. We're thinking of you down here in the West Coast, where it was 70 degrees yesterday in some of the coast areas here in Oregon. And Oregon coast is usually pretty cold too. So we're having it pretty good so far. Usually we get this week or so of weather that teases us, makes us think spring is showing up, and then we get another 6 to 8 weeks of cold and gray and rainy. But we've got legal marijuana here in Multnomah County, so it ain't so bad. We'll find a way to get around it. Pacific Northwest sativas, the best in the world, because they have to be. All right, on today's show, it's Tuesday, and we've got another edition of our Reformer's Reader. And today we're going to be speaking with Edward R. Cook. He is the author of this book, Arthritis and Marijuana, and subtitled How Marijuana, Diet, and Exercise Can Heal Arthritis. Interested in talking to him about his perspective on the issue. The book has some photos of some exercises and is in large print for older readers as well. So I think you'd get a good value out of this book. We'll talk to him more about that at hour. Then in the Radical Rant today, we're going to talk about you and your brain. That's right, your brain on marijuana, and folks, it's just fine, trust me. We'll give you some of the studies and information that shows you that all the scares about cognitive decline in frequent marijuana users is just hype, just more reefer madness. On the show today, in our Behind the Headlines segment, we're going to take a look at 4 groups that are vying to reform Ohio's marijuana laws. Now, we have a guest coming up on the show from one of these groups coming up very soon. My good friend Tanya Davis, she's with the Ohio ResponsibleOhioans.org. She's with one of those groups. We'll talk to her on tomorrow's show. And so in preparation for that, I thought we'd get all familiar with the 4 groups that are trying to reform marijuana laws in the state of Ohio. So stay tuned for that and Behind the Headlines. Also in drug war data mining today, we have some new polling information from the state of Minnesota and a couple of interesting questions that go a little bit beyond the typical, should we legalize, should we have medical marijuana? I think it gives some really interesting perspective for the possibilities of legalization in the land of 10,000 lakes. But all of that comes after the 420 radio news, and that's coming up right after this first break. We've got the headlines today, an update on Oregon's MBank pulling out of Colorado just a week after it said that it would take pot accounts. We've got an amazing statistic from Adherence Colorado on how much theft in the cannabis industry is internal theft. We got a bill in Georgia finally for protection for medical use of CBD, but there's a catch you need to know about. Also, medical marijuana legislation in Pennsylvania has been reintroduced in the Senate. Looks like it's got a much better chance this time. And in Wichita, Kansas, right smack dab in the middle of the heartland, on April 7th, they'll be voting whether or not to decriminalize in the city of Wichita. We'll give you all the details and the rest of the headline news coming up next on the Russ Belville Show.
You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
420 Radio, freeing your mind 24 hours a day. This is Radical Russ, encouraging you to take a look at the Weed Blog every day. Johnny Green and the staff at the Weed Blog are on top of all the latest developments in the fight to end marijuana prohibition nationwide. You can even get the Weed Blog on your smartphone by installing the Weed Blog app for iPhone and Android. If it's about weed, it's on the Weed Blog, including my original writing. So don't delay. Read the Weed Blog today.
Big Daddy thinks.
Funky roller ring.
Oh yeah, this is Big Daddy, and I'll be your freakazoid every Thursday night, right here at the Funky Roller Ring.
Funky roller ring.
11 Eastern, 8 Pacific, only on RadicalRuss.com.
Sir, do you think there will or should come a time for us to discuss the possibility of legalization, regulation, and control of all drugs, thereby doing away with the violent criminal market as well as a major source of funding for international terrorism? Thank you so much for your time, Mr. President.
Well, I think this is an entirely legitimate topic for debate.
Name the time and place, Mr. President. Radical Russ has been prepping for this debate full-time since 2005. The Russ Belville Show.
It's time for the 420 Radio News, covering the latest headlines in consumer cannabis, medical marijuana, and industrial hemp. Transcripts of 420 Radio News are available daily on our website at 420radio.org. Now, here's Russ Belville with your marijuana headlines in 4 minutes and 20 seconds. This is your 420 Radio News for Tuesday, January 27th, 2015. Oregon's MBank pulls out of Colorado a week after taking on pot accounts. The Oregon Community Bank's CEO, Jeff Baker, said, quote, "Following national press, the volume of inquiries in Oregon, Washington, and Colorado has been so overwhelming that we don't currently have the infrastructure to adequately support all these customers," end quote. People familiar with the move say the retreat was pressed by federal banking regulators who stepped in late last week to tell MBank executives that crossing several states to work with an industry that remains illegal under federal law was simply too risky. Part of the issue, Baker said, was MBank's lack of a Colorado branch, which would require approval from state banking authorities. Baker sidestepped questions about whether it was the FDIC, the agency he said offered its tacit approval to the idea only a week ago, that pushed MBank out of Colorado. More than 90% of theft in the cannabis industry is internal, according to Adherence Colorado, a new firm that conducts third-party compliance audits for marijuana dispensaries and grows. Quote, "Theft is very common due to the low wages paid in the marketplace and the transient nature of the industry's badged labor force," end quote, said Steve Owens, founder and CEO of Adherence Colorado. Internal fraud at one of Adherence Colorado's first clients exceeded 5% of cost of goods sold on a monthly basis. With revenues in excess of $400,000 per month, the business experienced some $20,000 or more per month of revenue leakage from theft. Of the more than 2,000 licenses to cultivate, manufacture, and sell marijuana that have been granted in Colorado since recreational use was legalized on January 1st, 2014, at least 25 recreational and medicinal shops have been suspended or closed in the past few months. A bill that could legalize medical marijuana in Georgia was formally submitted to the House chamber Monday, about a year after the first effort failed to pass. Several families that could be affected by the law's passing stood by State Representative Alan Peake at a press conference. Peake said 17 Georgia families are considered medical refugees who have uprooted and moved to states like Colorado or California, where medical marijuana is already legal. Peake announced more than 100 state politicians have signed onto his bill so far. Under that law, families who have legally accessed cannabis oil would be granted immunity for carrying the medicine across state lines. The problem is they'd still be breaking federal law. Peake said after extensive talks with Governor Nathan Deal, it was clear the governor wouldn't sign a bill that had a grow provision attached because Deal believes more research should be done. Legislation that would allow medical marijuana in Pennsylvania has been reintroduced in the Senate after a similar measure died last year after it failed to make it to the House floor. Senate Bill 3 is nearly identical to its predecessor, Senate Bill 1182, which passed the Senate in September by a vote of 43-7, but was never considered by the House. In all, the bill currently has 25 co-sponsors, including 14 Democrats and 11 Republicans. It also has the backing of Governor Tom Wolf. In its current form, the bill would create a board of state officials and medical professionals that would be charged with implementing the state's medical marijuana law. The licensing fee for growers and dispensaries would be $50,000 with a $5,000 renewal fee every year. Patient cards would cost $100 with a $50 annual renewal. Initially, the state would limit the number of growers and processors to 65 each. Voters will decide on April 7th whether to lessen the penalty for first-time possession of marijuana in Wichita, Kansas. The Wichita City Council voted 6-1 Tuesday to put the measure on the ballot. The proposal seeks to amend the city code and make a first-offense marijuana possession a criminal infraction with a $50 fine instead of a misdemeanor. The conviction would be expunged after 12 months if an offender keeps a clean record. Enforcement would be handled through a summons or citation, similar to a traffic ticket, rather than an arrest. The charge would apply only to those 21 or older carrying 32 grams or less of marijuana and or the paraphernalia to use it. Current city ordinances and state law say possession of marijuana and drug paraphernalia are criminal offenses with a fine of up to $2,500 in addition to up to a year in the Sedgwick County Jail. This has been your 420 Radio News for Tuesday, January 27th, 2015. I'm Russ Belville. 420 Radio, your ticket to Seattle Hemp Fest. The International Cannabis Business Conference is coming to the Hyatt Regency Hotel in San Francisco, California, February 15th and 16th, 2015. Don't miss this exclusive opportunity to hear from the experts on the future of marijuana commerce, including scientists like Dr. Carl Hart, Dr. Amanda Ryman, and Dr. Stanton Peel, policy experts like Ethan Nadelman from Drug Policy Alliance, Anthony Johnson from Oregon's Legalization Campaign, travel author Rick Steves from Washington's Legalization Campaign, and California legalization pioneer Dale Sky Jones. Business experts like Harborside Steve D'Angelo, ArcView Group's Troy Dayton, and UFCW union leader Dan Rush. Cannabis journalists like Ricardo Baca, Steve Bloom, and Doug Fine, and California Republican Congressman Dana Rohrabacher, plus many, many more. Tickets are on sale now at internationalcbc.com, but hurry, last year's conference in Portland, Oregon was a sellout. International Cannabis Business Conference, San Francisco, California, February 15th and 16th, internationalcbc.com. NORML stands for Responsible Adult Cannabis Use. If cannabis use is causing problems in your life, consider taking a break or seeking medical assistance. Consider ceasing cannabis use if you have a family history of mental illness. Don't drive or operate heavy machinery while impaired by cannabis use. Cannabis use is not without risks, even though the risks are far less.
The Green Cross has been an amazing source of cannabis medicines for my pain management. Whether I need edibles or tinctures or topicals, I'm able to combine the 2 or 3 to give me really successful pain control.
It's the delivery service that Green Cross provides is just incredible. You get your medicine and it's delivered by a person that you trust.
Whether we come to you or you come to us, the Green Cross delivers.
Welcome back, everyone. 14 after the hour. Time for us to go behind the headlines, where we ask who will legalize Ohio and how. You remember the 20th century when the idea of just allowing sick people to use marijuana as medicine was barely developing on the liberal West Coast? Remember how it took a Herculean effort to organize a single campaign to gather signatures on petitions to vote for marijuana reform? Well, those days seem like ancient history now that the green rush is on, and news media are proclaiming that marijuana is the biggest growth industry in America. And nowhere is the confluence of activism and capitalism more pronounced than the great state of Ohio. There are 3 groups fighting to legalize adult marijuana use in Ohio, but the one getting the most press lately is ResponsibleOhio.com. Their website is sleek and professional, and the group has very wealthy backers. They are proposing retail marijuana stores that may be operated by any adult Ohioan, suggesting that out-of-state entities will be shut out. Also proposed are marijuana product manufacturers operated by adult Ohioans that sell only to the retail outlets. The measure would also legalize medical marijuana by providing for nonprofit dispensaries. Responsible Ohio would tax marijuana at 15%, divvying up the revenues 55% to local governments, 30% to law enforcement, infrastructure, and public safety in the counties, and 15% to a marijuana control commission. But part of why Responsible Ohio has wealthy backers is their proposal on marijuana production. Just 10 sites would be approved for marijuana cultivation, written into the state constitution, effectively guaranteeing 10 wealthy growers a cartel monopoly on Ohio pot. Their claim is that having just 10 growers ensures that Ohioans will receive top-quality inspected marijuana. Somehow, I think the legions of professional growers in Colorado and Washington would be offended by that last assumption. And noticeably absent from their website is any mention of how much marijuana Ohio adults could possess and more importantly, how much they could cultivate at home, if at all. It also does not reveal the actual text of the amendment they are proposing, merely summaries of the adult marijuana for-profits and medical marijuana nonprofits. It's the first marijuana legalization campaign I've ever covered that leads with the pot shops and ignores the pot shopper. Adding to the stealth nature of the cartel monopolists at Responsible Ohio is their appropriation of the name of the activists in Ohio who have been working for years to promote marijuana legalization. Their site, responsibleohioans.org, lacks the professional web development of their doppelganger, but it has been in existence since 2011, and it is a registered political action committee. The marijuana cartel monopoly site was just created last summer. With the money they're throwing around, you'd think they could have come up with an original name, unless their intent was to bank on the goodwill Responsible Ohioans have built within the cannabis community. Now, Responsible Ohioans propose that marijuana be legalized for all adults age 18 and older. Adults could possess 99 kilograms, that's 218 pounds, and cultivate 99 plants for personal use. Urine testing for cannabis metabolites as a condition of employment would be banned. Mere presence of metabolites or active cannabinoids alone could not be used as proof of impairment. The rights to organ transplant, child custody, health care, government assistance, bearing arms, and banking could not be denied to marijuana consumers and producers. All marijuana prisoners would be released from correctional supervision and their records expunged, and all probation and parole violators sent back to prison for failing marijuana tests would be released as well. It couldn't be more activist-friendly an amendment if it declared Jack Herer's birthday a paid state holiday. Then there are Ohioans to End Prohibition. They're at legalizeohio2016.org, coming in somewhere between the business and activist polls of the two responsibles. While the text of their cannabis control amendment is also missing, this group claims it would legalize marijuana for adults 21 and older, as well as creating a medical marijuana ID card that provides for untaxed purchases. Adults would be allowed to home grow, but no specific plant count is mentioned. Any adult or corporation could apply to grow, process, or sell marijuana products through a merit-based application process that includes out-of-state investment. Legalize Ohio makes no mention of limits on licensing, aside from the market will dictate how many licenses are issued. And marijuana would be taxed, but again, no specifics. And localities could ban marijuana commerce through a popular vote. Industrial hemp would also be legalized. Now, in addition to the three legalization campaigns, there is also an Ohio Cannabis Rights Amendment pushed by the Ohio Rights Group at ohiorights.org. This amendment would legalize only medical use of marijuana in Ohio for the usual conditions found in most other medical marijuana states. Medical consumers would be free to possess and cultivate marijuana sufficient to meet their therapeutic needs. A commercial system of growers and dispensaries would be created. Industrial hemp would be made legal. Patients could not be considered legally impaired for the presence of metabolites in their body. Well, great ideas and grassroots support alone will not get legalization onto the 2016 ballot in Ohio. The 800-pound gorilla so far is Responsible Ohio, the cartel monopolists. Will the other three groups consider their quests for perfect legalization, or will they combine resources to provide an effective single counter-proposal? Wow, we used to have to deal with not having enough money and supporters to get a single proposal voted on. Now it seems we have too much money and too many supporters with competing ideas that may end up dooming them all. So if you think the Ohio situation is unstable and frightening, wait till you take a look at California. Oh my God. Folks, we might be facing a roadblock, and that roadblock might be ourselves. Time for us all to get together and form one coherent strategy to legalize. Happy 420 to all my friends and family back in the state of Idaho. We're back after this. 420 Radio, your ticket to the High Times Cannabis Cups.
Georgia. Hi, this is Willie Nelson. Alcohol prohibition didn't work in the 1920s, and marijuana prohibition isn't working today. It's time we stopped arresting responsible marijuana smokers. It's the fair thing to do.
For more information, contact NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. Call toll-free 888-67-NORML or visit their website at norml.org.
Connect with 420radio.org through social media, on Twitter at 420radio.org, and our Facebook page at 420radio.org. Follow us and like us today. You'll be glad you did. Get.Buzz. .Buzz is the internet platform that fuels community interest, excitement, and new experiences. .Buzz is the premier online destination for internet users seeking the latest news on a variety of topics. .Buzz appeals to groups active in blogging, communications, journalism, advertising, and marketing. .Buzz offers registrants a stronger alternative to the shrinking namespace of existing top-level domain names, such as .com, .net, and .org. Get your name now at get.buzz. Arguing for the end of adult marijuana prohibition is easy because we have facts, science, reason, compassion, evidence, truth, and logic on our side. It is even easier when researchers catalog it all for us. Learn how to gather the facts on marijuana use, arrests, seizures, rehabs, drug tests, and more in this edition of Drug War Data Mining. Welcome back, everyone. 22 and a half after the hour, and today we've got some polling data to go over from Minnesota and Virginia. The Minnesota data comes to us via way of public policy polling. They have a survey that was commissioned by Minnesota NORML. The dates of the survey are January 18th through 21st, so very, very recent information. And I think it provides us some keen insight on legalization in the upper Midwest. Now, the usual question that they ask is whether or not marijuana should be taxed and regulated, or should marijuana be regulated like alcohol? This is the questions we've seen in the past, but now that we've got marijuana legalization in existence in 4 U.S. states and the District of Columbia, the poll questions are evolving a bit. And so in addition to just the numbers from this poll, I think it's interesting to note the phrasing of the questions and how the people are answering them. Their first question on legalization reads, do you think marijuana should be legalized and regulated in Minnesota like it is in Colorado, Washington, and like it will be in Oregon, Alaska, and Washington, D.C.? Now, that's kind of a weird way to ask the question from my point of view, and probably from your point of view. Being a listener to this show, you probably are very well aware of the fact that those 5 different legalizations are all quite different in how they propose to tax and regulate marijuana. In the case of Colorado, they chose to tax it at 10% excise, 15% sales, or maybe I've got that backwards, but 25% worth of taxation. They decided to allow people to grow their own marijuana and set a presumptive DUI limit at 5 nanograms of active THC per milliliter of blood. They have a vibrant and active medical marijuana regulation system that has been folded into their recreational system, providing one marijuana enforcement division that oversees all marijuana in the entire state. Now compare that or contrast it to Washington State, where they don't allow for home grow, where they have exorbitant taxation, 25% at 3 levels of production, where they have a unregulated medical marijuana system that is in open competition with their recreational system. They have hard caps, limits on how many licenses can be produced or distributed throughout the state. And localities throughout the state are banning these facilities. Then you take a look at the state of Oregon, which its marijuana legalization will be a flat tax of $35 an ounce, no limit on licensing, 4 levels of production, and retains the right of people to grow their own, and runs alongside a well-functioning medical marijuana system. And contrast that to Alaska, which is going to do a $50 flat tax, no limits on licensing, but doesn't have a well-functioning medical marijuana system. And then Washington, D.C. couldn't be more unlike the others in that it doesn't legalize marijuana markets at all. It has a grow and give system. You can grow marijuana, you can have marijuana, you can give it to others, but no pot shops. So when you ask a poll question, should we legalize it like 5 different places that have legalized it all differently, that seems like a weird question to me. But we have to take the perception of the average person taking the poll here. They don't know all of that detail. To them, the question just means, should we follow the first 4 states that have stopped treating pot like a crime? Now, if that's the question, to that sentiment, a plurality of 49% of Minnesotans agree, and just 44% are opposed to that idea. But we have the gender gap. Women are split 46-46 on whether or not marijuana should be legal. Men support it 51-43. But that's actually good news because a 5-point gender gap is a lot less than what we usually find in these polls. Another typical question, do you think Minnesotans should be allowed to consume marijuana for medical purposes? Well, it gets a lot more support. Over 3 in 4 Minnesotans, at 76%, support medical access to marijuana with little difference in support by gender, race, age, or geographic region. Only Republicans showed significantly less support, and that was at 61%. And Native Americans, interestingly, showed far greater support. It was at 93% among Native Americans. Now, some other questions were interesting. One question asked whether or not marijuana prohibition was more effective than alcohol prohibition. 54% of Minnesotans believe that it is not any more effective than alcohol prohibition was. 52% of Minnesotans think that the people, not the politicians, should decide on marijuana's legality. And 51% believe that Minnesota's economy would benefit from the market legalization of marijuana. There was no demographic, age, gender, race, Republican, Democrat, that believed marijuana prohibition was more effective than alcohol prohibition, but women and Republicans were less likely to believe market legalization would help the economy. And finally, in Minnesota, a plurality of Minnesotans, 46%, believes that not enforcing marijuana prohibition would make Minnesota safer by allowing police to concentrate their efforts on real crime. But 40% disagreed and 14% were not sure. A majority of Republicans, 52%, African Americans, 55%, and Latinos, 54%, didn't think ending prohibition would make Minnesota any safer. And finally, the news out of Virginia, recent poll shows that 71% of Virginia voters support decriminalization, 69% support medical marijuana. 420 Radio, turning red states and blue states green. Growing plants indoors can be a rewarding hobby, but electricity bills can go through the roof. Then you have to cool down all those big hot lights. It can drive a grower insane. With Lush LED lighting, you can solve many of these issues and double your rewards. Matt and his scientists have developed the perfect light for flowering plants with far less cost and heat. And the results? Very effective. Check out LushLEDlighting.com right now.
Despite strong public support for medical cannabis, decriminalization, and legalization in Georgia, the state spends $121 million every year to arrest, prosecute, and imprison Georgians for simple possession. Each year, the state of Georgia spends less on driver services, agriculture, and forestry combined. What else can $121 million a year do in Georgia? With that much money, the state could hire and keep 3,000 more teachers, improve roads and bridges, provide tax relief for small businesses, repair aging sewage systems, or lower taxes. But right now, that's millions of dollars of your tax money wasted on failed enforcement. Tell your representative you're tired of wasteful spending and ask them to end cannabis prohibition. Join the conversation at www.peachtreenormal.org. Peachtree NORML is a proud affiliate of NORML, the national organization for the reform of marijuana laws.
The law offices of Omar Figueroa would like to remind you to stand up for your rights. If you are detained or arrested, treat law enforcement with respect and stand up for your rights by repeating, "I respectfully invoke all of my legal and constitutional rights. I do not consent to any search and seizure. I want to remain silent, and I want to speak with my attorney." Please contact the law offices of Omar Figueroa at 415-489-0420 or 707-829-0215 or on the web at omarfigueroa.com.
The best weapon you can have in the Prohibition War is your mind. Fill your head with the knowledge you need by checking out this latest entry in the Russ Belville Show's Reformer's Reader.
Welcome back, everyone. 31 after the hour, and today on the Reformer's Reader, we're taking a look at this new book. It's entitled Arthritis and Marijuana, How Marijuana, Diet, and Exercise Can Heal Arthritis. Our guest is the author, Edward R. Cook. Edward, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, Russ.
All right, I got a copy
here.
Yeah, I got a copy here of Arthritis and Marijuana, and the back cover just says, "After years of working and recreating very hard, I found myself with debilitating arthritis." And so the book is kind of a recollection of your experiences trying to overcome arthritis, and you found that marijuana can be a very helpful adjunct to that. Give folks the basis of this book. How is marijuana going to help their arthritis?
Well, for me and for many others, it helps people feel their body more intrinsically, and it gives gives you a better attitude towards pain. It helps you, kind of come to peace with your debilitation, and it helps you kind of work through things. And for me, it also kind of helps me get through exercise and get through some motivational factors with it and so forth, so that I can move better. My body's less crusty, and I have a little better attitude towards pain and towards debilitation and everything. And it kind of comes full circle. There's a lot more that I can describe, but I mean, it just, I guess in a word, it's about the attitude towards, your body just feels better, and your mind feels better. It helps, and it's a natural medicine.
We've spoken to many doctors on the show who explain the anti-inflammatory properties of cannabinoid therapies, and the physical aspect of this, I think people are already starting to accept, but I find it interesting how your book talks about the mental aspects of using cannabis as a therapy here, and I think this is something that's really underserved in the patient community, and that is dealing with the mental hardship of being disabled, of being in pain a lot. Talk a little bit about that and how marijuana helped you.
Well, as I said, it helps you feel your body more intrinsically. I guess that's the physical part of it. But also it gives you a little better attitude, and your mood is much better. A lot of times, you're miserable, you're not happy, and you're kind of depressed and everything. Well, this kind of makes you look at things a little more rationally, and kind of think, well, okay, I have this, but how can I work with it? And it kind of, it makes you kind of hop along with it a little bit better. And then other things start to come into play once you start overcoming your arthritis. That is such a great natural kick to you that it really helps with any kind of depression, and it makes you feel so much better about overcoming arthritis and your disability and so forth. So that helps mentally, and it's an attitude changer, a mood changer, which makes things for the better. I think that's part of. I guess I don't want to use the word high to it, because that kind of bring some stereotypes to it and whatnot. But there is some truth to it, that it helps with your attitude and your mood.
Edward, your book mentions how marijuana, diet, and exercise can heal arthritis. And I'm thinking of those last two, the diet and the exercise part, and how marijuana might help in that respect. I know marijuana is famous for giving you the munchies. Maybe that helps with the diet aspect somehow, and marijuana relaxes you as you're trying to exercise. Perhaps that's part of it as well. What recommendations do you make in the book as far as diet and exercise go?
Well, when you exercise, it tends to give you a better appetite for better foods. I find, as far as like the marijuana with the exercise, I find it's not stereotypical. Like people will talk about the amotivational effect, where the stoner on the couch or whatever sits there and does nothing. I find the opposite. I find it motivates me and gives me some said it buzzes my body so that I want to move. I want to work on things, and I say, well, okay, my knee's aching here. Let me see if I can do something about it. And I find I do the body rolling and some other things. As I say, it makes me feel my body more intrinsically, and I move and once you get through that, and even without any kind of marijuana, exercise will do this. Whether you swim, whether you run, whether you do things. After you exercise, you have the endorphins and other, things in your body and in your mind. For me and many others, it helps you eat better foods, like especially right after exercise. I have an appetite to eat good food like apples and bananas and that kind of food, and I'm motivated to eat such things. I have a certain type of appetite to do so. I stress in the book that it's okay to eat, your other things, pizza and, other so-called junk foods and things, as long as you eat the good foods first. And you can generally do that immediately after exercise when you have that certain type of appetite. And I find marijuana does that. And depending on what you do in your life, in addition to, marijuana use and so forth, your exercise, your running and things like that, it tends to help eat, better food, gives me a better appetite for better foods and so forth. And I think that can do, I dare say many people will echo that sentiment as well.
I will. I've been working on getting in better health, better shape, eating better. And I think you're right. I've found that marijuana helps me. When you get a craving when you're not high, it always seems to be for the junkiest thing available. But when you are high, when you are using cannabis, carrots are just as good as potato chips, it seems.
I think it helps with a little bit of self-discipline as far as food goes.
Yeah. We're speaking with Edward R. Cook. He's the author of Arthritis and Marijuana, How Marijuana Diet and Exercise Can Heal Arthritis. And you mentioned that technique of body rolling. I have to show my listeners here on the webcam, page 47, demonstrating the body rolling technique. And Edward, I got to say, in black and white, that picture makes it hard to discern that that's a softball.
It is. I do state in the book that it's optional. I mean, there's different textures of different balls. You can use like kids' playground balls. You can experiment with whatever works for you. The thing about a ball, you can roll with it and get right to the exact spot. It's not like there's a hard edge to it, that makes things painful and whatnot. And because you're using your own body weight, you can apply whatever pressure you want. So it doesn't have to be painful. It can be somewhat pleasurable to roll out any kind of aches and pains and tightness in your muscles and so forth. And usually with the back of the knee, there's usually a tight glob back there that you have to kind of rolling like dough, you kind of roll it out a little bit. It makes things feel a lot better when you loosen that glob up a little bit.
We've got some great resources in the back of the book as well, pointing to Arthritis Foundation and NORML and Arthritis Advisor, AARP, a bunch of books here in NORML group publications, Clint Warner's book, great book, Mitch Earlywine's book. How much research did you put into finding this out about arthritis and marijuana? Was it something you'd already figured out from doing it personally, or did you read research and go, oh, I ought to try marijuana in this aspect?
Well, I did it all, actually. I had my own, personal experiments with it, but I also did a lot of research, too, and read a lot. And, what works for one may not work for another, and people have to find what works for them. So I put all those resources up there so that people could figure it out for themselves. There's all kinds of ways to go about healing, and, people need to figure out what works for them. When you have to kind of be aware of, a doctor or some sort of salesman will say, this cures everything, this cures this cures that. Well, it may cure for you, it might not cure for me. and different sources offer up those options for people and so forth. And some people, to each their own. If they don't want to use cannabis, they don't want to use marijuana, they'd rather go the pharmaceutical route. Well, that's them. That's fine. But for myself and many others, marijuana is an option, and it should always remain an option. And all those resources gives people several options. And I did do a lot of research. I wanted to make it, a competent book, and I wanted to make it, worthy for people, and that's why I put those resources in there.
Excellent. Now, with respect to arthritis treatment, have you found different types or strains of marijuana to have different effect for you?
Well, that's interesting. Since I wrote that book, a lot's come out about strains, and there's a lot of different delivery methods, oils and topicals and so forth. And I find with strains, there's a little bit of marketing going on. There's a little bit of overratedness to it. I find what happens is they leave a lot of human element out of it. Like your mood at that particular, the set and setting of that particular day. And let's say you have a certain strain. Well, what about the freshness of it? How has it been stored? Was it grown indoors or was it grown outdoors? There's way too many variables to say that this strain will do well for multiple sclerosis. That strain will do well for arthritis. I think people need to look around a little bit, experiment around a little bit. Generally speaking, what you would want would be like a 50-50 indica sativa. You'd want THC as well as CBD. You don't want to. I think what's happening, I'm afraid to say, with the legalization movement, you're going to get some, GMO, some genetically modified things going on here, and I really don't like how they strip away the THC and how they take away from the natural plant, and they're trying to itemize things a little bit too much. Mm-hmm. I think if you have a natural plant, with a balanced strain, so to speak, that carries so much better than if you strip away the THC and have a CBD-only plant. Now, I will say, like in certain cases, like with pediatric epilepsy, for example, you really don't want the THC. Adult dementia, you don't want the THC so much. So those, you might want to go with a CBD heavy strain and a THC less so strain. But for the average adult, you want the THC because that does help with the mental aspect. You want, a balanced strain. So sometimes I think there's a little bit of marketing. People will say, well, this does this does that. I think it's more up to the individual and all the other variables that I mentioned there.
All right. Well, the book is Arthritis and Marijuana, How Marijuana Diet and Exercise Can Heal Arthritis. Edward R. Cook is our guest and the author. And Edward, tell folks where they can get a copy of the book or get in contact with you online if they want to.
Well, you can, those words, arthritis and marijuana, if you type in those words, you should be able to find it anywhere books are sold, like be it a Nook, a Kindle, Amazon, libraries you can special order it from, bookstores you can special order it from. You can go to my website, www.arthritisandmarijuana.com. It's an ebook, it's a paperback, as well as an audiobook, so it's out there. You might have to search for it a little bit, but it is common. It is up on most all platforms, and it's a fairly easy read, and it's to the point, and I think it can help a lot of people, and that was my intent when I wrote it.
Thank you for doing so, Edward R. Cook. Thank you for being a guest here on the Russ Belville Show, and good luck with the book sales.
Thanks so much for having me, and I hope we can help a lot of people.
All right. Stay tuned, folks. The anti-drug public service announcement of the day is coming up next, and then a radical rant. We're going to talk a little bit more about your brain on marijuana. Stay tuned. We're back after this.
You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
420 Radio. Tune in, turn on, get highly educated.
You know Herb Thrasher from the Herb Thrasher Flower Hour. Now get ready for Herb Age designs for the proud cannabis consumer.
Age Designs, lifestyle gear for the 420 friendly. Age Designs, we've got Frisbee golf discs and durable hemp gear. Age Designs, we've got shot glasses, drinking glasses, coffee mugs, and beer cozies. Check us out on Facebook and online at herbagedesigns.com. And follow Herb Age and Herb Thrasher on Twitter. In the interest of fair and balanced journalism, the Russ Belville Show presents the anti-drug public service announcement of the day.
Wait a minute, how are we going to do this? Oh, we don't want to sound too preachy, right?
Yeah, it's really important that we don't make it seem like we're pointing the finger at anybody.
No, but drugs are a problem. I mean, there's a lot of peer pressure in high school, and the point is, drugs can really mess you up. And if anyone needs help and feels like talking about it, call 1-800-COCAINE. We should have filmed it.
What was that number again?
Holly, it's right there.
Oh.
This has been the anti-drug public service announcement of the day. To cure this sort of reefer madness, listen to the Russ Belville Show every weekday on 420radio.org. Adam Hand of Handmade Apparel produces quality custom designs for t-shirts, hats, and other apparel. Handmade Apparel is the official design shop for 420 Radio among many clients who rely on Adam Hand for everything from short-run custom projects to full-run clothing lines. Visit handmadeapparel.biz to browse the selection of handmade gear or to get a personal quote for your own designs. Handmade Apparel, a proud supporter of 420radio.org.
We must wage what I have called total war against public enemy number one.
I support a change in law to end federal criminal penalties for possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
That marijuana, pot, grass, whatever you want to call it, is probably the most dangerous drug.
Some think there won't be room for them in jail. We'll make room.
I experimented with marijuana a time or two, and I didn't like it and didn't inhale.
And one major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
Entirely legitimate topic for debate.
Radical Rant.
Welcome back, everyone. 47 and a half after the hour. Just to remind you, if you smoke marijuana, you will permanently lose 8 IQ points as chronic THC exposure hastens the age-related loss of hippocampal neurons. The resulting impairments in neural connectivity will degrade memory, degrade learning, and degrade impulse control, eventually leading to an increased likelihood of becoming addicted to heroin. Well, the federal government says so. It's right here. It's right here in this page. What are marijuana's long-term effects on the brain? It's right there at the National Institutes on Drug Abuse. And Lord knows the government would lie to us about something like that, would they? Well, look, folks, scares about marijuana's long-term effects are as old as Prohibition itself. But the problem for the scaremongers is there's just too many older pot smokers alive who are actively debunking all these scares. I mean, hell, Whoopi Goldberg's in her late 50s, and she's chatting it up every day on The View. Cheech Marin's in his 60s. He's tearing through the competition in the game of Celebrity Jeopardy. Tommy Chong's in his 70s out there dancing with the stars. And hell, Willie Nelson's in his 80s, and he's still on the road again. Now, I know they're not rocket scientists or anything, but I don't think anyone would call any of these people stupid. Now, this nonsense about marijuana in the brain is just the latest set of scaremongering talking points from the same types of people who told us that marijuana would make the black men look at the white women twice, that it would cause the jazz musicians to seek relations with the white women, that, oh my God, it's going to lead to man boobs and it's going to destroy your sperm and your chromosomes. It'll lead to chromosomal damage and psychosis and schizophrenia. We've heard all of these things so many times before. And it's just about time that we put this nonsense to rest. This 8 IQ points nonsense, this is the latest big talking point from the prohibitionists. It comes from this study. It came out of Duke University in the summer of 2012. And ever since, the prohibitionists like Kevin Sabet and Stuart Gitlow and all these people, facing the prospect of 2 legal marijuana states at the time, pounced on it And they've been beating it into the ground ever since. Not to much effect, because now 4 states have passed marijuana legalization, even though throughout the campaigns in all 4 of those states, they hammered away, it's going to cause a loss of IQ points. Now, see, the problems with this Duke study were numerous. First of all, it only found the decline among the heaviest consumers of marijuana. And that was 38 people out of 1,073. Okay, so, Dr. Carl Hart and others have questioned, look, you got 38 people. How generalizable is that? How much can you expound on that to cover the entire population? And then another thing that you never hear about this study is that it found slight increases in IQ for moderate marijuana consumers. Funny how they never mentioned that good news stuff, huh? And there was another follow-up study about 6 months later in the same journal that found other socioeconomic factors explained the IQ drop just as reasonably as the marijuana use. For example, it might be that you grew up in a poor family. Being poor put you on the streets more often. Being on the streets more often led you to more access to marijuana. But it was the being poor that has the problem, that leads to the problem with the IQ drop, regardless of whether or not you end up using marijuana. It's those kind of problems with this study. So, I mean, it was hardly the slam dunk that the drug warriors wanted it to be. And you also haven't heard of this follow-up study. There was another study, came out just this year, last year, 2014, from the University of London. And a little bit more comprehensive. It studied 2,612 kids born in 1991 and 92. And they checked their IQ scores at age 8 and age 15. And the scientists found absolutely, quote, no relationship between cannabis use and lower IQ at age 15. None. Even the heaviest pot smokers didn't lose IQ points. And we're talking about age 15 and below, where the drug warriors are always telling us, oh, it's the adolescents that have the 1 in 6 chance of getting addicted. Their brains are still developing. And yet, even the heaviest pot smokers out of this study of over 2,600 kids did not lose IQ points. They did find, however, that alcohol consumption was very predictive of losing IQ points among ages 8 to 15. Ain't it funny how you don't see any TV ads about that? How come Kevin Sabet never brings that fact up, huh? And likewise, there are many studies that prohibitionists seize on to try to justify their stereotype perception of marijuana consumers as some kind of dullards. There'll be studies that look at results in rats, and then they'll extrapolate that to humans. Others will look at brain scans of marijuana consumers and know this little color means something different. But when scientists examine actual humans who consume marijuana, they find little to no difference in cognitive functions. One of the first scientists to uncover this truth was Dr. Carl Hart, the Columbia neuroscientist. He is the author of High Price, a neuroscientist's journey to self-discovery that challenges everything you know about drugs and society. High Price, The New Jim Crow, Understanding Marijuana. There's a handful of books that you should have as a reformer to be super informed on this issue. Dr. Carl Hart's High Price is on that top 10 list. You should get that book. In 2001, Dr. Hart published some research that showed that regular marijuana consumers showed no mental decline while high. Regular consumption led to a tolerance to marijuana's impairing effects. So, yeah, if you take the infrequent toker and you get him all blazed, he might have a little more trouble solving the crossword puzzle. But you get the regular toker blazed, and he solves the crossword puzzle just fine. And this may also point to problems that we've had with previous studies that have brought in people that are infrequent consumers and then subject them to marijuana and test them while they're high, finding all these terrible results. Now, by 2011, other researchers had followed up on this hypothesis. There was a study out of Australia that followed almost 2,000 Australian adults for 8 years. They found little to no decline in learning and memory. And what decline they did find? reversed itself after a short period of abstinence. Basically, they run these people through these tests, and one of them is recalling a list of nouns, right? Just random nouns. Grape, helmet, feet, dirt, tree. It might be a list. A whole bunch of these things in a row. And the people that get high more often were having more trouble remembering the entire list. But if they weren't high, that eventually came back, and they were able to remember these lists just fine. And as for that gateway to heroin, this idea that marijuana use primes the brain for the reward of drugs, right? This is another thing, this lack of impulse control that they talk about that develops through the use of marijuana. It looks like the National Institute on Drug Abuse has not read the 1999 report from the Institute of Medicine, which found that marijuana, quote, does not appear to be a gateway drug to the extent that it is the cause or even that it is the most significant predictor of serious drug abuse, end quote. Man, you'd think these institutes would communicate better. And we all know, of course, the histories of some of the legendary pot smokers out there, great minds, people like Dr. Carl Sagan, who came out as a near daily pot smoker after his death, was afraid to mention it for fear he'd be blackballed with Jet Propulsion Laboratory and NASA and all these government contracts, but revealed to Dr. Lester Grinspoon that, yes, he was a regular marijuana consumer, and marijuana consumption actually aided in his scientific exploits, in his creative solutions for problems, enabled him to open up different avenues of thinking. And we think of people like Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple, who came up with so many remarkable technologies and game-changing marketing plans. This was no dummy. And there are plenty of us out there that are hardworking, intelligent people that are doing amazing work. I mean, the internet as we know it would not exist without the input of people that were smoking a whole lot of weed. And even things like as simple as High Times magazine being published continuously for 40 years. Some of the people working at High Times now, and Bobby Black's on his 20th year working for High Times. I believe Rick Cusick is in his 60s now. And these people are all highly functioning people, pun intended, able to put out a magazine that continues to thrive even as all the magazines around it are dying, how print publishing is just dying. High Times continues to kick ass. The evidence is all around us to see the work of very intelligent and creative people whose regular use of cannabis has not only not led to declines in their life, but most likely enhanced their creative abilities and led to greater creations than we would have had without it. It's like Bill Hicks used to say, take all of the albums out of your collection that were made by people on drugs, and you'd have a pretty shitty album collection. But the simplest proof you need about marijuana and cognition is to just talk to an older pot smoker. You'll find that they're not any smarter or stupider than any other person you're going to meet, but their stories are better, and they're likely to share a bowl with you while you listen. All right, folks, that's all the time we got today. Thanks for joining us on episode number 530 of the Russ Belville Show. Stay tuned for Hour 2. Toker Talk Radio is coming up next. Our phone lines will be open at 971-533-7111. We'll talk more about the news of the day and what's happening in the cannabis community. We got an interesting proposal in Michigan, pot for potholes. Gotta like the marketing on that one. And in Colorado, looks like some people might be getting some tax money rebates because they collected too much marijuana tax. Oh, what a nice problem to have. For everyone here at 420radio.org, I'm Radical Russ. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.